We narrow down the topic. And that is typical for a sort of scientific approach to any topic. So this is learning by example. When you have to write a paper, an essay, or a thesis at the end, this is what you do. So repeat. As of chapter 3, we especially work with the C of command. A specific rule, 1 milligram. If you do not comply, we punish you. Okay. Well, where are these rules then developed? When you look at the European Union, there are two ways. Either member states have already the rule for bottled water and so forth, or, and increasingly, the European Union is concerned about market failure, because here we have an internal market. So products that are produced in Ireland are sold in Romania, and products that are made in Finland are sold in Portugal. And those states agreed that they communicate with each other in Brussels. And part of the communication is about market failure. Because how on earth can a Portuguese consumer check the quality of a product that is produced in Finland? Can even speak Finnish. And that is why it is logical that on European level, more and more specific rules, command type of rules, are developed to combat market failure. Medicine, food, banking services, insurance services, elevator equipment, cars. So most of the things we use on a daily basis are determined and regulated by European rules. And then maybe in quarter 1 you learned how that works. The European Union can create those rules in 2 ways. One is sort of the most powerful way, that is by regulation. And the regulation is instantly applicable in all 28 member states. And then you have directives. And directives are instructions to the member states to implement the content of the directive in local legislation. Is that new for you?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay. Don't worry about this one. And those are sort of the technicalities of legal rules in the European realm. And in the United States of America, it's not completely similar, but it looks similar. And there you have quite a few federal rules, 50,000 pages, on all kinds of issues, among others, disabled people in airplanes, bottled water, and nicotine in cigarettes. And on Blackboard, the European rules and American rules are both available. So that you can see, hey, societies tend to make the same command rule. If on a global level we realize nicotine in cigarette kills you, then there's a global movement to stop smoking, and that is then trickling down to legislation on how much nicotine is in cigarettes. Because the ultimate step of combating market failure, as in not allowing cigarettes on your market, is also not working. Think of drugs, think of alcohol in the 30s in the United States. If you ban a certain product where consumers are still addicted to, and then the product is still there. The next step is chapter 4, is the thinking, well, if you have rules, how do we know that people comply? And the only way to find out is that you have an enforcer or regulator or authority or agency or inspectorate, all names that belong in chapter 4, that actually check whether the rule works. Otherwise, you did not achieve anything. Then still the consumers die. Say, well, we have a rule, yeah, but they do not comply. Well, that's your problem. And then you didn't achieve anything. Well, and that results in an abstract job description of any of these regulators, authorities, inspectorates, agencies, and forces. And the job description is gather information about the question whether goods and services comply with the set rules, form a legal opinion on that information, and if it is a negative opinion, intervene, take action. That's the whole point. Question?
Yeah, refer that if a job description or a goal of an organization is more abstract and less defined, then a worker has more freedom to do whatever he wants, how he wants to do something.
Yeah. So maybe job description is a confusing term, but it is the task and the essence of that organization. And why I call it a job description is that everybody in that organization should contribute to that task. And so regulators also have accountants who pay for the travel expenses of the collectors of information, but they contribute to the main task being those 3 steps. And everybody in this building contributes, if it is correct, to your learning. Fingers crossed. And that is what I want to share with you. That employees do not have jobs. Organizations have tasks. And if you belong to an organization, your task is to make the organization successful. And the drama in society is that people have that they have personal tasks. Like, I'm an accountant, so I do accounting. Sorry for those who love accounting. But accounting doesn't solve anything. And it is a facilitator of a higher goal. And that is why I zoom in on that task. To the extent that as an employer, I would say if you cannot prove as an employee that you contribute to the bigger whole, then you should go home. You should be dismissed. Why pay for people that do not contribute to? And one way to achieve that is that everybody in the organization should know what is the task of this organization. That is why I try to talk to administrations in education and tell them, listen, I'm in a class, and it helps if you help me in organizing the schedule in such a way that you're in the class at the same time that I'm in the class, and so forth. So that you involve them in the primary process. Well, just a little tip for the future role as employer, because one day you will be employer, and have this little conversation. So these arrows try to symbolize the essence of the task of those entities. And then this is a stamp, inspected, and one way of actually communicate to the society this one is inspected is to put a stamp, or in meat, a sort of sign that you burn in the meat. So when you're in a butcher shop, and then you see those half animals, and then there are these sort of stamps on it. That means that actually someone looked at it. And that is then sort of the fabric in society that you try to communicate that you do chapter 4, because it costs quite a lot of money. So you better market the fact that you actually are inspecting the meat. And that was the news article of last class, that in the Netherlands, they demolished the arrangement of the inspections. They sent away those inspectorates of the meat. And they said, well, put your own stamp on it. And guess what? Then there was poop on the meat. And so, if you are putting stamps on products, and then you should not be employed by the same company that we met in the next chapter, compliance. chapter, however you want. Because as compliance officer, chapter 5, you're employed by the producer. You're just an officer. You're the colleague of the person who messed up and allowed the poop to be on your meal. So who are you to say, I'm not putting a stamp? Then the colleague says, well, who is going to the boss? You or me? So I want you to realize that there is an intrinsic, unsolvable conflict of interest. And at the same time, there's sweet talk. So people pretend that they're able to put a stamp on it. No, I'm very independent. I report directly to the board of directors. So I'm not depending on my colleague who is putting the poop on it. And I want you to demystify it, to pierce that veil and say, yes, that is true to a certain extent, but not to the full 100%. Question?
Yeah, we talked about the risk manager and compliance officer, that the risk manager is going from bottom to top, and compliance officer is from top to bottom. But I read the keys, and it was on the keys.
Yeah.
But I still don't.
Yeah. Well, the compliance officer, chapter 5. Yeah. Step 1 is it's an employee of the firm. And so the opposing party from the state perspective. Nothing more, nothing. And the opposing party from the consumer perspective. Nothing more. What is this? What type of employee is it? And that is sort of IBMS thinking. And so how do you organize a business? And then you have sort of thinking in management thinking. And management thinking results in departments and lines of command and the central board and the production department and the accounting department and so forth. And in that thinking, you could zoom in on the compliance function. And then also take sort of historical glass. And then with a historical perspective, you could say there always have been risk officers because every firm checked the quality of the product. That's a normal thing to do. So when you produce goods and services, it's normal to check the product. Farmers in the Middle Ages did that too. You know, when you harvest your potatoes, you check this one is good, this one is bad. This one I bring to the market, this one not. And out of that function, you could say, just to understand why risk officers and compliance officers think that they're not friends. You could say that checking the quality is sort of risk officer type that evolved in big companies to a separate job in a firm. Shell, Unilever, pharmaceuticals, and so forth. So people started to call themselves, I'm a risk officer, at home, at birthday party. What's your job? I'm a risk officer. Oh, alright. And then later in history, people started to call themselves on birthday parties, I'm compliance officer. Oh, what are you actually doing? Well, I don't have a clue myself. Yeah? But now we have a clue. And who started to hire compliance officers? That were the boards of directors. That's why I call it top down. So there was sort of, in those big companies, 400,000 employees, the board started to think, every day we get a letter from the state that there are new rules for our product. Let's hire someone who translates those rules to our processes. And that should be a very intelligent person who understands rules and who understands regulators and administrative law, and what are our rights and what are our obligations. So, compliance officers have suits and degrees of university. Risk officers know things about machines and potatoes and chemical processes and how plants explode and these types of things. So it's sort of social economic description. It's not science, but just to explain why within big companies, many different types of officers think we are responsible for the quality. And then the sort of edge of the compliance officer is that it is the mirror of the regulator. It's quite often a legal profession. Other people who are pissed off because of the emergence of compliance officers are the in-house lawyers, because they thought, I love the rules. But in-house lawyers do not have a clue about project management and processes, how to implement a rule in a workable process. And lawyers say, this is the rule, no poop in the meat. Don't ask me how to do it, but the rule is no poop in meat. Thank you very much, Mr. Legal Officer, but how are we done to implement it? And that is, and so maybe the fusion of all those roles is your profession. I'm not 100% sure, because it's you, but maybe you are best equipped to have those different visions incorporated in a new profession. Una, yes?
But isn't it now, because the risk manager has to listen to the compliance officer, because there are new rules and new laws every year. So the compliance officer hears about them, implements them into the process, and then the risk manager has to execute them. So in a sense, the compliance officer is maybe the manager of this.
Yeah, and so most compliance officers hope that they are on top and that they're the boss and they may boss around the rest of the company. Sure. But all these decisions, all these labels, all these qualifications are just choices of companies. There are no rules for them. So if you want to call your compliance officer the hula hoop officer, you're free to do so. And then you have a meeting of the board and the hula hoop officer. But if people start to copy-paste job advertisement and start to call those officers the same, then they team up and they form a little association of compliance officers. And they talk to each other. How much do you earn? And how much can you boss around the people? And that's sort of in the interest of the society, because then you can make a course on compliance officers, and maybe even a degree, and you understand each other easily, and in the Braithwaite pyramid, you can easily translate, let's say, the capacity building to this identified officer. You don't have to look for the hula hoop officer. You just send a letter to all the companies to the attention to the compliance officer. And then somehow it finds its way to someone who is having this role to translate. Within the regulatory approach, you have the approach of Mr. Braithwaite containing or consisting of two tactics. One, to build capacity in the regulatories, and two, to sanction. So within as of this phase, Braithwaite says, hey regulators, be human and talk to the companies in the context of capacity building. Call them and say, hi guys, I exist. May I invite you to explain to you what the rules are. Because the aim is to avoid market failure, not to play hide and seek. But in secret you're a regulator and that you think, doo-doo! Yeah, so capacity building as a professional, proportionate task of the society, the state, and to talk to the regulatory.
That's always ex ante.
That's ex ante. Yeah.
Always.
Yeah. Let's say capacity building is ex ante. but it's a circle.
Yeah.
And so, historically, you first have poop in the bottles of water, and then you develop a rule, no poop in the water, and then you start capacity building. Streptococci. We do not have streptococci in Belgium, where Spa is made. Well, with a laboratory, and still bacteria, yes, you have poop in Belgium. Capacity building. And then, if that does not work, then you do the expensive sanctioning period. And so then you move to chapter 6. And that is nicely symbolized by, are you willing to do the right thing? Then make it straightforward for you to comply. As in stands, as in forms, as in frequency of passing by. Do you try to comply but don't always succeed? Then I support you to comply. I send the regulator once more to explain about the streptococci. If you do not want to comply, then I deter by detecting an administrative sanction. Administrative sanctions are called administrative to distinguish them from criminal sanctions. And those are just words. That is just because lawyers are specialized either in administrative law and criminal law, and they do not understand each other. So they do not mean anything other than that certain lawyers are in the type 0 regulator, the judiciary, prosecutors, judges, they think criminal law. And then the rest of the administration or government or state is of executive nature, of administrative nature, as lawyers call it. And there we have those 4 types. In circles, as in a stone in a pool of water, and then the riddles. So the central power can be the regulator itself. Then the arm's length entity, in Dutch zelfstandig bestuursorgaan. It's a separate legal entity. Then the independent body outside the state, central bank, university department, laboratory. And the farthest away is within the industry itself. Example, bar association, medical professional board. And this is a picture of the American Food and Drug Administration. And so this is arm's length. It's not in Washington somewhere. Or is it in Washington? Anyhow, it's not, let's say, the same building as Obama. Why is that? And why is that still relevant? The example of last week, the poop in the Dutch meat. They want to reorganize it again, proving that everyday arrangements are reconsidered. And so the drawing is redesigned every day. 2, the proposal now is to have the regulator on central power, so type 1, and then in the Ministry of Economic Affairs and Agriculture, who's responsible for agriculture, including meat production, but the Ministry of Economic Affairs and Agriculture is also responsible to promote the goods and services of the Netherlands for export reasons. And how on earth can a minister one day be the promoter of Dutch meat and then the next day be the stamper? No, there's poop. I am not allowing this to be exported. That's a conflict of interest in the head of the person. And then you can say, well, we put them on different floors. Well, but then they needed the coffee machine. And then we put extra coffee machines. Well, then they meet in the elevator. And so conflict of interest is a conflict of interest. So then as a compromise, the journalist said, well, at least put it then in the Ministry of Health. That's a different building, different minister, who is not on a mission to put in to sell this meat to Russians.